A year ago, almost to the day, I made one of my most controversial videos in the history of this channel, discussing how the XFL and the NFL could go along to get along. But now with a year of hindsight, and after PJ Walker became the first XFL quarterback to make an NFL start, we have the opportunity to actually examine how the XFL in its third iteration could truly change the mold for how a competing sports league could really work, standing alongside one of the Big Four. Let's discuss. So as you might have guessed, I was motivated to make this video after PJ Walker was given the nod in the Panthers game against the Detroit Lions. The Panthers had come in, I believe, on a 5-game losing streak. Teddy Bridgewater was hurt. He was cleared to play, but the coach made the decision to throw in former Houston Roughnecks quarterback PJ Walker, and one of the frontrunners for the MVP in the XFL. And he came in and he certainly did his job. The Panthers picked up a 20-0 win. Walker went 24 of 34 for 258 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. And those 2 picks kind of dragged his rating down a little bit, so he ends with a 77.8 rating. But, you know, I mean, even Russell Wilson makes turnovers. You know, regardless of that, PJ Walker going 24 of 34 for 258, that's pretty solid, especially for a Panthers offense that has looked pretty lethargic for most of the season. So good for PJ Walker, and all of us who watched the XFL and watched PJ Walker do what he did. I think all of us are happy to see him there and happy to see him having success, because he certainly worked hard and he certainly deserves it. And this, I believe, goes to a bigger issue about how the XFL really stands up in comparison to the NFL. I mentioned that almost a year to the day it's been since I released one of my most controversial videos where I talked about how the XFL and the NFL can actually coalesce. And this is what I said when it comes to how I believe the XFL should operate going forward.
But if the XFL positions itself as a league where players get a chance to show their worth to the NFL, they'd occupy a space no league has ever been in before. And I'm not saying for the XFL to become some kind of minor league system, because then why would people even bother watching it? I'm suggesting a healthy working relationship between the XFL and NFL. A relationship where XFL players can be signed to NFL contracts when they're needed, and players looking to prove themselves worthy in the eyes of NFL organizations will take their place.
Now, obviously, after watching the XFL and after the pandemic, things have changed a lot in terms of what I believe about where the XFL could be and how well they could do. And considering the fact that now The Rock owns the XFL, or at least The Rock's company owns the XFL. So a lot has definitely changed. But I wanted to revisit this concept of how the XFL could actually find their niche in the game of football with the overpowering giant that is the NFL always lurking over its shoulder. Because what's going on with PJ Walker, I think, is a microcosm of what the XFL could be going forward in terms of their relationship with the NFL. So the first thing that I want to point out is that PJ Walker is not the only XFL player that has made his way to the NFL. In fact, there are about a dozen of them currently in the league playing various roles, and and from various XFL teams. You have the Roughnecks, the Renegades, the Wildcats, the Vipers, the Battlehawks, the Defenders. All of them have players that are currently playing in the NFL, and some of them are getting some real playing time. Obviously, PJ Walker gets himself a start. Donald Parham has been playing well for the Chargers. Sergio Castillo has been playing really well, the kicker out for the Jets. So PJ Walker is the biggest example because he is a quarterback, the most important position on the field. He was given the start despite the fact that the current starter was cleared to play. So this is the guy that I want to frame the topic of conversation around, but this does extend to the XFL in general. In my video last year, I suggested that the XFL essentially, I didn't put it this way, but essentially what I suggested is that they bend the knee to the NFL. Whatever the NFL asks them to do, the XFL should do, because the NFL can remove them from existence as easily as sneezing if the NFL wanted to do that. My opinion on that particular point has actually changed somewhat. I think the NFL might now actually be looking at the XFL, maybe not as direct competition, but at least as not insignificant when it comes to cutting into the fan base, the enthusiasm base of the NFL. The reason being is that the original XFL was very niche, and it almost played to a fan base that didn't exist. It was designed to appeal to a fan base who liked football but didn't like the NFL, and at that time there just was not a lot of demand for a product like that. Or a fan base who they were casual football fans but serious wrestling fans and wanted to see the two blend. And they were going for a market that didn't exist. Well, today's XFL is actually going for a market that very much does exist, because there is growing sentiment against the NFL and what the NFL has done. From everything from player contracts to the rules that the NFL has instituted to the way that the games are broadcast, there is I wouldn't call it a groundswell, but there is at the very least a rising notion that maybe the NFL doesn't have everything right, and maybe things can be done better than the way the NFL does it. And at this time last year, before the XFL season had started, the assumption was that the XFL would pretty much try to copy exactly what the NFL did, but just do it in the spring and summer rather than the fall and winter. Well, now that we've actually seen the XFL, they didn't do that. The XFL did a ton of things that I really, really like, and that a lot of people really liked. And I actually made a video about this after the first week of the XFL that you should go check out if you missed it, talking about all the different things that the XFL has done that I personally think are fantastic decisions. Everything from the way they broadcast games to even the extra point rule that they changed. I'll link the video, so go check that out. But it is a lot of fun to watch the XFL, and I think that's exactly what the NFL is seeing. They're seeing a league that people just enjoy watching. It's not the big stars. It's not the first overall picks. It's not the guys making tens of millions of dollars. It's guys that love to play the game of football and a bunch of fans who love to watch the game of football. And those two things combine to really make a product that the NFL doesn't quite sell right now. The NFL sells just that, a product. They try to sell you football. And look, I watch the NFL every weekend, so I'm not saying it's a bad decision, but when you look at the NFL ratings, when you look at the fact that ratings are going down for a myriad of reasons, not just because of the declining quality of the NFL in terms of all the things that I've discussed, when you look at that compared to the XFL, I think the NFL is seeing a league that they might actually be able to borrow a little bit from, which now brings us full circle to how the XFL can actually coexist with the NFL. Because now, instead of the XFL just clinging on for dear life, hoping that the NFL doesn't turn around and blow them out of the water the way that the NFL has done to leagues in the past, well, now the XFL has a little bit of bargaining power here. The XFL can go to the National Football League and they can say, hey, look, we're delivering you players. We're delivering you not only players that you use, but players that you start and players that win you games. When it comes to PJ Walker in particular, or when it comes to Sergio Castillo, who's been playing really well for the Jets, and obviously we know the kickers are very integral to the way that football is played. The XFL can go there and just tell the NFL, you know, maybe there is value to the XFL sticking around here. And the XFL now, as I said, has bargaining chips, and that totally changes the way that we're looking at how the XFL and the NFL will coexist versus where we were at this time last year when I made the video that I've been talking about, where pretty much my only goal was to make sure the XFL survives, just survives the onslaught of the NFL. Well, now it's not about just surviving for the XFL. Now I think it's about thriving, because I think they can. I genuinely enjoyed watching the XFL. I had more fun watching the XFL than I generally do watching the NFL. I'm not even joking about that. There are things about the XFL that were more fun than anything you see in an NFL football game, in my opinion. I think the XFL knows that, and I think the XFL knows that it has a fan base and it has a lot of people who loved what they did the first time around, and you've got a clear schedule where you have the NFL is on off season. The only things you're competing with is the NHL, which they don't really share fans with the NFL that much, and the NBA, whose ratings have absolutely fallen off a cliff this past season. And so the XFL's looking at a market and saying, you know what? I think we've got something here. And so what that means, when you go back to my original video talking about how the XFL refused to let a quarterback out of his contract to go play for the NFL, I was worried that that would cause the NFL to turn around and just obliterate the XFL because they have that power. Well, not anymore. Now I think it's time for me to say that I was wrong about the way that I thought the XFL should have dealt with the Josh Johnson situation last year. I was wrong, because the XFL now has, as I say, bargaining chips. The XFL can now treat itself as the true professional league that it has clearly become. When you look at the players that go from the XFL to the NFL, this is not an amateur league. This is not a replacement for college. This is a professional football league. They have now proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And it's time for the XFL to treat themselves that way, and I think they are. So it's time for me and anyone else who is skeptical of how the XFL can coexist with the National Football League going forward to say that the XFL has the opportunity to be around for a long, long time. We'd probably still be talking about them getting ready for the new season if the pandemic hadn't happened. But so now that the XFL has a third lease on life with the Rocks company taking over, it's time for the XFL to do exactly what they did last year and treat themselves like the professional league that they are. I was wrong about how the XFL should bend the knee to the NFL and just hope the lawyers of the NFL don't come calling and absolutely destroy what the XFL has built. No. It is time for the XFL not to treat itself as direct competition to the NFL, but to treat itself like it deserves to be in the same conversation when it comes to professional football. The old adage in sports is act like you've been there. And it's time for the XFL to act like they've been there. The XFL is coming back, and it will have some of the best players that couldn't make the NFL, and certainly some players that will end up in the NFL. And I think that people around the XFL know that, and I think they're looking at it and saying, we have a product here, we have a brand of football that people are going to be excited about, that people are going to really want to watch. And now we can use that as a bargaining chip. Instead of saying, hey, we're the startup football league, someone please come watch us. No. Now it's about, we are a professional football league that gives you a different product than what you're seeing with the NFL, and you will come to the XFL and you will watch that product because you enjoy it. You're a football fan, and now you're an XFL fan. Because for me, I consider myself an XFL fan. I don't necessarily consider myself an NFL fan. I consider myself a Seahawks fan. But I am an XFL fan. I want to watch the product that the XFL puts on the field, and I don't think I'm alone. So I was wrong last year when I said that the XFL should avoid competition with the NFL at all costs. I think it is now time for the XFL to treat themselves the way that they should be treated, as a professional football league in the United States of America that absolutely has the capacity, again, maybe not to directly compete with the NFL, but to stand alongside the NFL the way that many of us doubted that they'd be able to. And I, for one, am absolutely psyched about the prospect of the XFL returning whenever it does. I will be waiting with bated breath, and I'm sure a lot of you will as well. Subscribe for all of our coverage, both XFL and every other sport related here on GA Sports. Thank you so much for watching this. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Subscribe. We appreciate you.